a snow day today here in North Carolina. It's cold, but I am very warm because I've been practicing this bass line from Chick Corea on Armando's Rumba. So let's take a closer look at it now. Welcome to Learn Jazz Bass with Matt Rybicki. I'm glad that you're here. Today we're talking about Armando's Rumba, which I think is an essential bass line, although it's not one that will be necessarily called very often, but it's really good if we get a chance to know it ahead of time before we're called on to play it, even for a gig that's in the future. You want to have your hands on this way ahead of time. That's because the bass line played by Stanley Clarke matches the melody for the most part, and it is rather, challenging. It's on the higher end of the scale of technically challenging, but I think it is something that we all should know. Now, this is on Chick Corea's album, My Spanish Heart. Forgot for a second which one it was, released in 1976, and Jean-Luc Ponty is playing violin on this as well. Very cool album, and this tune has basically kind of become a jazz standard. For good reason. I think it's a lot of fun to play. And it gives us an opportunity to do something that we don't do terribly often, which is to double the melody, obviously. And that provides some challenges, but also a lot of fun. Now, the legal rule book that has this in it has a very accurate version that's almost perfect. There's a couple of little minor things that I'll put in the PDF that I'll include for you of this bass line so that you see there's some differences in what is in the real book, although it's pretty minor. The idea is still the same across the board. And as I say, it is a very challenging thing to first maybe get your hands on, but it might help to think about how the melody itself that we are playing matches the chords that are happening very accurately. And what that can do for us is sort of give us a sense perhaps of where we are when we're learning the tune. Oh, I'm playing this particular riff and that means I'm here in this chord. And there's not a lot of chords that are happening necessarily. I mean, at least in one section of the tune is basically C minor and then a D7 and a G7 C minor. That repeats several times. So that's something to sort of latch onto. And the notes, while they're sort of jumping around, do pretty much define those chords. If you think about it, the very first phrase, C, E flat, G, C, G again, all from a C minor sound. And then the next notes are A and F sharp. That's right from a D7, right? And then on the first go around, A flat. And what that's basically defining, A flat, F, D, B natural, is a G7 flat 9. A flat is a flat 9. So, and then to C again, which is what the chord does right there on the downbeat, although it's anticipated a little bit. Nonetheless, there's a couple little variations in there to what's happening, but as I say, putting the chords over the melody itself may help. So yeah, it gives us the great opportunity to actually play the main melody with the main instrument, which is always really fun. In this particular one, it's a little bit challenging, but that's cool because that gives us stuff to work on. And I also want to bring your attention to the form or the arrangement of the tune itself. There is this intro part. That's an intro that only happens once, at least on this recording. And then there are a couple sections to the main melody. When we get to the solos on the recording, there's this repetition of these sections, if you want to call them A and B, is repeated twice. And then there's the interlude, which really play it very well there, but that part, that interlude, and then it goes on for another sort of half section for the solo, and that is the solo form on the recording. So it's important to note that. Also though, when they go back to sort of the head out, as we normally do, it's not exactly what you might think. Yes, they play what we might call A and B, but after they play A and B, they jump to the interlude. And from the interlude, they go back to B. So it's like A, B, and then interlude B, and then the coda out, or the final part of the thing. So these kinds of things are important to know when you're playing with others so that you know the parts of it that may need to be manipulated. Hey, are you going to play the interlude or not, right? Hey, are we going to do the exact form on the record or not, and so on. So it's a thing that you've got to communicate with your bandmates about for sure. This melody, if you think about it, is really centered in, well, not only the harmony of the tune itself, but I'm saying the chords, but it also has a general sense to me, and might be helpful to you, to just think of like all these sounds as rotating in a sense around C harmonic minor. And just to review, in case you don't remember, that would be C, D, E flat, F, G, A flat, and then B natural. That's kind of the general sort of ethos, for lack of a better word, I'm such a nerd, for this tune. Yes, there are other notes in there, but when you sort of, at least when I think of it as coming from that scale, and the other notes that make the melody interesting match up with the chords that are happening there, it sort of all makes a little bit more sense. However, because of the technical difficulty of it, you may end up, as I did, just kind of memorizing all or part of it just because you have to repeat it so many times to try to get it even close to playing like Stanley Clarke played it. And after this part that I played for you at the beginning of this video, Stanley Clarke plays a solo with a ton of technical stuff. So it's very interesting to listen to. So the shape of this melody, as far as for my own sort of personal feelings about playing it, challenged me in some of, at least one particular sort of hole in my technique, which is ascending on strings, changing strings, ascending with 2 fingers. This is something I need to work on more. I'm aware of that. And yet, when I am practicing this for a while, it becomes a little bit easier and I start to sort of focus in on ways to make my fingers do what I want them to. However, it's still not as clean as I would like it to be. This very first part of the main melody, C, E flat, G, that part is very challenging for me. And then obviously throw in the thumb position and it's got some new challenges there. Nonetheless, it is a great, look at it as an opportunity. It's an opportunity for us to work on some things that may be deficits in our playing. And perhaps you can't get this up to speed with Stanley Clarke. I was barely hanging on, as is probably obvious. Nonetheless, it's a great exercise, and it's something, as I say, that we should be familiar with, because there are times when you may be called on to play this tune, and they may want you to try to play the melody. There's a couple very minor things that are different than what is in the legal real book, as I mentioned. And as I said, I'll put it in the chart that I have for you that is correct what Stanley actually plays. One thing is two things are very, very minor. 3 things are very, very minor. I guess it's all very minor. But when we're playing the main melody, right from the beginning, it goes 1, 2, E flat, G, C, like that. That's correct on the first time around. But when it is repeated and he goes up to thumb position, the notes change from E flat, G, C to G, C, E flat, C. And you may have seen me jump down from thumb position to here because I'm sure is awkward to play it here. I mean, I could practice it there. I didn't really feel like it was speaking, and I learned it here, so that's where my hand is going. So there's definitely more efficient ways to do it, and I encourage you to find more efficient ways to do that. Nonetheless, that's a minor thing. So in the real book, it's shown as that exact melody repeated up an octave. It's not, it's changed right there in bar 4 of the main line. The other thing is that in the pedal point ostinato bass line part at the end of the whole sort of main melody where there's a B flat in the bass, what is written in the legal real book is very, very close. There's just like one place where he eliminates one of the notes that's played. Not a big deal. As I say, I'll put it correct in my chart. And the other thing is that in the interlude, the way that the rhythms are written out, I don't think really accurately reflects the feeling of how they're playing it. I think it's more, I'm talking about the very first phrase of the interlude, by the way. I think it really has more of like a quarter note triplet feel to it, as opposed to the 8th note followed by a quarter note thing that they've got there. But you can hear, if you listen carefully, that it feels like a couple of them are off on actually how to interpret it, how to phrase that. So either way could be kind of considered correct, but I'm trying to sound as much like the record as I can. That's how I hear it. Bad fingering there. And the other thing in the interlude that I may be mistaken on, but to me is a bigger deal, is that in bar 7 of the 8 bars of the interlude, there is that triplet, quarter note triplet figure where it goes G, A flat is written, B natural, C. So it's written as G, but I think that they are playing G, A flat, I'm sorry, A natural. I could be wrong there. I think somebody's playing that. It was a little bit hard to tell, but either there's a mistake there or I'm making a mistake, but listen for yourselves and see what you think. Just notice that based on the key signature, it's C minor, so relative key of E flat major, you're gonna have an A flat in the relative major key. I don't think that necessarily reflects exactly what they're playing. Regardless of what you play in those particular little moments we're talking about in the interlude, as long as you're able to execute 99% of it, or as much as you can with confidence and accuracy, those little moments of maybe a little bit of crunch with an A flat, somebody playing an A flat and somebody playing an A natural at the same time, can be forgiven by the ear. It's not the end of the world at all. And if it bothers you, you can of course get together with somebody else, talk about it, transcribe, see what you think it is, and so on and so forth. But it's really not, as I say, the end of the world. Now remember too that this is going to give us the opportunity to practice another technical thing, which is of course thumb position. And what I like about this particular device, in thinking of it as a tool, is that we know what the main melody is supposed to be like once we learn it here on the instrument, right? We know where it is here, and we know what the sound is supposed to be. So when we are transferring it to thumb position, it is essentially the same, except for that one little moment that I talked about. It's essentially the same melody, so you know what it's supposed to sound like. So the question becomes, how do I finger it? How do I actually execute it here? So you're eliminating one of the variables of what notes am I supposed to play on the page, and rather I'm just sort of thinking, looking, feeling, and so on and so forth. What's the best way to finger this for me? One example of how I made a choice here is that for whatever reason, I found it more comfortable down low in the B section, the very first part of the B section. It goes E, C sharp, E, G, F. I play that G open. I don't know why. It may not even sound the best, but it just feels better to me than playing it closed here. However, in thumb position, it makes more sense to me to play it closed, partially because of the different relationship I have to the instrument sort of physically here, and also I'm allowing myself to stay on the D string as I play it. E, C sharp, E, G, F. And ultimately, I'm trying to get my middle finger, my second finger, on this F because the next note is E. And then F sharp is right there. So E, whoops. And then I'm switching down, D, A. And part of why I'm switching down and playing it here is because I want to play the fastest part of this line on the G string, which is easier for me to play faster. That's harder for me on the D string. And I couldn't really, it's more difficult to switch strings. So I'm trying to put it all on one string. G string is the easiest to play faster, although not necessarily in tune, as you just heard. Nonetheless, gives you the opportunity to work on thumb position stuff, which is really cool. Don't worry if you can't get it up to speed, as I may have said earlier. Don't worry about it. It's okay. Just be familiar with it. Perhaps it will move you, inspire you to have something to work on, and this is certainly a technical challenge. One other thing I wanted to point out too was that like the rhythmic feel of this is really like a fusion. I mean, this is kind of coming into the fusion era of that label of jazz in 1976 with this album, and certainly Return to Forever, Chick Corea and Luke Ponty and John Luke Ponty and Stanley Clarke are in Return to Forever together. And so there's this fusion of elements already, and here they're bringing in some things out of the Latin diaspora, the Afro-Latin diaspora. Even the title, right, Armando's Rumba, I'm not 100% sure, and please someone correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think this vibe or this rhythmic basis is Rumba. I could be wrong on that. What I do know for sure though is that what Stanley is playing on the bass in the solos doesn't quite match any sort of really traditional thing that a bass would do in traditional music from Cuba, for example. You may have heard me do something like a tumbao, which is essentially like a rhythmic pattern that is very displaced coming out of the Afro-Cuban tradition. I don't know a lot about it. There are other experts, and I don't want to sort of insult anybody by speaking on something I don't know that much about. But I've been called on to play it at times, and I've worked out how to sort of do this thing, a lot of anticipation and so on and so forth. It feels good to me. I tried to allude to it at least, but the way that everything is sort of mixed up, it's hard to sort of keep any sort of traditional thing, which is also the fun of it, right? But just know that there is underlying authentic traditional music that informs this, but it is not traditional music in and of itself of those Latin rhythms, is kind of the point I was going for. One thing I do want to share with you about playing Latin-based bass lines, though, that is kind of rudimentary, that can really change how you approach it, are two very, very simple things that sort of take some time, I think, to internalize. The one is a concept of sort of having the ground rhythm, basically sort of the underlying force behind the rhythms that we hear is a duple meter. So duple is 2 or 4, but it is in 2. That is the base of it, as opposed to 4. So that's why, for example, much is written in cut time and so on and so forth. It's not 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. It's 1, 2, 1, 2. And the sound, especially when we slow it down, 1 and 2, and 1 and 2, and 1 and 2. That, even though it sounds super simple, if you actually listen for that, it totally changes sort of the subtleties of where the rhythms are placed. And that can make a big difference in how you interpret it. So instead of 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, and 1, 2, 1, 2. Very, very simple, yeah? But think about that when you're listening in the future and try to figure that out. Another really, really critical thing, I think, is that what has happened over time in higher education and so on and so forth, when we are talking about making bass lines, especially on fast things, we're trying to sort of fusion the fusion, meaning like mix up or sort of spread out or codify something that, like Stanley Clarke did, for example, that was very busy. And my point is that oftentimes in traditional music that is fast, like a samba, it's actually like half notes. There is not a busy bass line at all. The idea is you want to be a counterbalance against the drums or the other things that are the drums and the percussion that are very busy. We are not trying to match their busyness. So if you're finding yourself feeling tense and rushed and so on when we're playing something fast, simplify the bass line, half notes. Like, just play them with the right feel, and that is going to make the whole band sound better, I promise. So that is kind of a simple, but in a way I feel sometimes secret tip, because simplicity is your friend in a lot of these instances, and that's not talked about a lot. So going to that sort of direction of simplicity, one of the challenges obviously with this tune is the tempo. It's fast and there's a lot of eighth note lines, right? We've already gone over that. So just for sort of, not argument's sake, but just for information's sake, let's play it at half speed. Let's play it at 50% of the normal speed. And perhaps you can get a little bit more familiar with what the notes are and how you might play them if you see me and hear me playing it at half the speed, right? So I'll start the recording and then jump in the intro when I know what the time is. So C minor, C minor. Partially anticipated. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of insight into how you might play it if you're going to practice it. And certainly don't feel bad about not playing it up to tempo, practicing it at a lower tempo until you sort of get the kinks worked out. Thanks for joining me today talking about this essential and bit of a challenging and definitely warm bass line. I hope that you will join me for the next one. Thanks for being here. Look for the links below for a free PDF related to this lesson. And as always, remember, straight ahead and strive for tone.